Adobe Stage. My name is Patrick Burgoyne. I'm a trustee here at D&AD, and I'm delighted to welcome onto the stage with me Stephen, aka Professor Green.
Afternoon.
So, Stephen, I wonder if we could talk, to start off talking a little bit about your life as an artist. I've heard you before refer to the way that today a musician has to be almost like their own cottage industry in the way that they work and have to be maybe more entrepreneurial. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how an artist has to operate today compared to, say, 20 years ago or when you first started getting into the business.
I think there's been huge shifts. Most obvious one for me was definitely when streaming became a part of how you ended up with your chart position.
Yeah.
I forget the year now, but I released a song just before my third album called Lullaby, and we got the midweeks in and we were at #1, and I was like, yes! Another #1 single in the bag, get to Friday. Calvin Harris is #1 because he's a really heavily streaming artist. And I'm like, what's streaming? You know, when does this come into it? And that happened within a really short gap. I think that was within 3 years.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my first encounter with streaming and its effects on the chart position. But I think artists are smarter nowadays. I think it's one of those things where I think it's a gift and a curse because you can spread yourself too thinly quite easily. If you don't say no to things, no is an important thing to learn to say in life and in work. But yeah, there's a hell of a lot more opportunity, but it's picking the right ones and making sure you keep your integrity and you do things that fit with, your brand, as well as working with brands that fit with you. I think people are really stupid, I think to ever underestimate your audience makes you the idiot, not the audience, because people can see through anything that's shoehorned in.
Yeah. I mean, you must get approached a lot of times by brands. So for you, what makes for, I suppose, a successful collaboration or a collaboration that you feel comfortable with?
It has to be something that fits, and it's got to be honest. And I can't really work with companies that don't align themselves with my visions and values.
Yeah. And so do you find sometimes people just kind of, I don't know, they want you to badge something or use you as a sort of short circuit to buy in some cool or to... Listen,
the one thing that artists can do that company and I guess more to the point corporation can't do is engage with people.
Yeah.
And we do it bloody well because that is our actual job.
Yeah.
And we speak to people by way of our art, which is something that huge corporation can't do. At the moment, like I've spent years, I've been talking about mental health and trying to keep that conversation, to start that conversation initially, and since to really keep that conversation alive. And I was talking about it when it wasn't cool to talk about, when it really wasn't okay to talk about it. And ever since, it's been, I've tried to tread the line really carefully because people now want to buy into that work that I've done. But at the same time, if that gives me a platform and puts me in front of people that I wouldn't otherwise be in front of and gives me the opportunity to educate people, then that's something that's still worth doing. And that means I have decisions that I have to weigh up and think long and hard about.
Yeah. So I want to explore the work that you've been doing around mental health a little later, but I was just wondering in terms of now as an artist where you're constantly exposed to opinion about you and your work through social media, and how do you deal with that? How do you develop the kind of, resilience or perspective on something like that?
Honestly, if you're not in my immediate circle, then I find it really difficult to take your opinion on board. And that just comes from common sense, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
If there's someone called Donald in Skegness that tells me I'm shit because I'm shit, I'm not going to, you know what I mean? And that's as much as he can articulate his point. I'm not going to take it on board. And as an artist, I think it's really dangerous. If you start taking on every opinion that you read and you take that to the studio with you, how can you ever be an artist?
Yeah.
And I've been making music for a long time now. If I can't be sure in my decisions, the decisions that I make creatively without, taking on those opinions, then I'm in the wrong job. It's really dangerous, I think. And what you've got now is, and I'm lucky because I didn't even have a phone until I was like 14 or 15. So all of this has kind of happened at a point when I'm already an adult. But what you've got now is people who are shooting up to, astronomical numbers on their Instagram by way of shows like Love Island, and we're seeing the result of the lack of aftercare. It's like giving someone the keys to a Ferrari without ever giving them a single driving lesson. It's a really dangerous game people are playing here, because, as you've said, there's a lot of opinions that come with a lot of followers, and if that's where you find your validation and people are constantly saying horrible things that are making you change opinion of yourself or making you think about, whether that stuff is you, and you're taking on board those opinions, that's incredibly unhealthy.
Yeah. And younger artists who are coming through, I mean, do you speak to younger music artists and try and advise them about how to deal with that? Because it must be incredibly difficult for people starting out now with all that around them.
Yeah, do you know what? Like, a lot of the people that I bumped into, younger artist-wise, and I'm around, they deal with it really, really well.
You just have a kind of natural feel for it.
They just have a real natural feel for it, yeah. And I think what you're starting to see now is the first generation of artists that are really starting to rebel against it. There's a lot of, anti-establishment about quite a lot of the artists that I favour that are coming through, and I think that's really welcome, because it kind of, it needs to move on.
Yeah, yeah. And in terms of collaborations, I mean, the kind of music you make involves a lot of collaborations naturally. Yeah. So from a musical point of view, what are the conditions that you need to have in place to have a collaboration that goes really well, and when can they sometimes not quite work as well as you would like them to?
If it wasn't to work as well as you'd like it, or as I'd like it to, then you'd just never hear it. It'd get buried. And to be honest, the times when it hasn't maybe worked as well as I'd have liked is just when I've been in the studio with someone, and you've got, myself and whoever else of completely competent of writing a song on our own, and then you put us together and we can't.
Right.
Sometimes it's the wrong day, other times it's just not the right chemistry.
Yeah.
For me, a successful collaboration is a collaboration where both artists are happy with their end product. It's never the chart placing. Me and the song that I did with Miles Kane, Are You Getting Enough? Around capitalism, one of my favorite songs, one of my favorite videos, wasn't a huge chart success, but I perform it, it creates mosh pits, and we both love the song. Like, whatever, I just think, I've never made a song that I've been told to make. I've never been forced down a path I didn't want to go down with my music. I've always just been really, really selfish when it comes to my art, and made the music that I want to. And I think that's really important, because then if something isn't a success or it doesn't go down well, it's cool, because I'll still stand on a table and tell everyone in the room that that's fine, because music is objective, but I love the song and it was my decision, so therefore I fell on my sword. Imagine how much worse you'd feel if you listened to someone else who told you to make a type of music or a type of song that you didn't want to. That was then a failure, and you were judged on that, but it wasn't your decision. And you went, no, wait, but you think people are going to care.
Yeah.
That's your own fault for going against what you felt anyway.
Yeah. And in terms of the way you engage with the visual side of making music, in terms of music videos and record sleeves, how involved do you get in that? Or what do you enjoy about that process?
I enjoy everything up until shoot day, when you're there for 19 hours and you get to like hour 19 and the director, who used to be your friend, is going, we need more expression. And I'm like, which expression? Because I've given you all two of them all day long and I cannot for the life of me move my face anymore. No, I enjoy the process. And normally when I write a song, especially when something comes together quite quickly and has a clear concept, I normally have a visual idea for it. So what I'll then do is send it before, normally even in some instances, before it's even gone to the record label, I'll send it to a director that I've worked with previously who I think would do a good job on it.
Yeah.
And just see if they like the vibe. And if they like the vibe, then I know I can probably get them for the price that the record label's willing to pay, because I couldn't normally otherwise afford them, just because they want to do it now, which helps. But now, and it's the visual aspect of it is still really, really important to me, because I think it can really, sometimes when you hear a song in a moment on the radio, it doesn't really capture you, but when you sit down and you watch a video, if the video does the song justice, then it can really expand on what the song's about. In song, you've got 3 minutes to tell an entire story, which can be quite difficult without a picture.
Yeah. Now we're going to play a clip of one particular music video in a second, which is for the single Photographs, which you did with Rag and Bone Men. Can you just talk us through a little bit about the idea behind Photographs and the way that came about?
Yeah. Okay, so Photographs was a song that was born really in its first instance of me being at my nan's, and I was with my then partner. My nan was doing that embarrassing thing that nans and mums and parents like to do, where they get out pictures of you as a kid, normally naked in the bath or doing God knows what. And my nan was doing just that, and we were laughing at pictures, and then there was a photograph of me with my dad, and I hadn't seen a picture of him, let alone me with him, in a long time. I just had to walk out of the room. You know, I'd lost my dad to suicide when I was 24, and yeah, it just hit me sideways. I wasn't ready for it at all, and that made me think about, you know, just how powerful photographs are. They're the memories that we don't often have. And from there, I just started to think more and more about it, and the people that I wish I had more photographs of or with, which became a line in the chorus. So, wish that I took more photographs of us, which Emily Warren helped me write, along with Chris Loco, who was the producer of that song and Lullaby. And how it actually began in the studio, I went to, and I had the visual idea for it already, but I went first to Chris Loco, who was just playing chords on the piano. I was like, that's it, that's where we start. And then I got to a point where I got stuck, and we asked Emily Warren if she'd be kind enough to help, and she did, and she sent back this beautiful voice note, which I won't try and sing now, because you don't want that. Nobody needs that. Of the chorus, and then Rag and Bone Man heard it, and he came on board, and I sent it to Simon Emmett, incredible photographer and director that I've worked with a few times in the past, and I explained the concept to him, and he loved it.
And there was this whole social media aspect where you had people sharing images of people that they'd lost.
Yeah, that started really, really organically. It was just that line from the chorus became a hashtag, wish that I took more photographs of us, and it just snowballed. And people talk about social media and all the negative aspects of it. I hear those conversations about social media all of the time. But there's really positive aspects and ways in which we can use social media and that access to people, not least of all by informing people. But in this instance, it was, you know, it became this beautiful open forum where people were able to grieve and share the stories of the people that they lost and loved. And I thought that was amazing, not least of all because we've got a terrible bloody attitude towards death in this country. We pretend it's not going to happen. It is. Every single one of us here is going to die one day. It's brought a bright note to the afternoon. And, you know, but then it does happen and we pretend it hasn't happened. And so to see people sharing the stories that they were sharing, and some of the photographs were incredible, you know, and you know when you see a photograph from a different age, just incredible photographs. And don't get me wrong, there was a lot of sadness, but people began to engage with each other and talk to each other about situations where they'd lost people similarly. And the ones that got me, the ones that were hardest to look at, I think, you know, as a kid, we might lose our parents before we ever imagined that we would, you know, but it was the ones where people had to bury their children. They were the ones that were really difficult to look at and to read, but there was a lot of them. And I just, you know, I never imagined when I was writing that song that this would ever have that effect on people.
Yeah. Can we play the clip, please? You mentioned that you've been talking about mental health issues really for quite some time now. So what was it that prompted you to think, okay, I'm going to start trying to speak out now, I'm going to start trying to make a difference?
I really wandered into it by accident. My dad took his own life when I was 24, which hit me hard. It hurt me a lot. My dad wasn't a great father, but he was a really, really kind person, really lovely person, and for the life of me, I couldn't work out how he had found it in himself to do that. You know, to hang yourself is incredibly violent, and he wasn't a violent person whatsoever. So that happened, And later on, I'd started a few years after. I'd started to do well by way of music, and the artists who I favoured, who I listened to when I was growing up, always wrote about what they were going through, what they'd seen, what they'd encountered, what the world looked like to them from their perspective. And so when I started writing when I was 18, I did the same thing. So some of my songs, most notably probably, Read All About It, touched on my dad's suicide. And that song was never written to be a hit, was never written as a commercial song. It wasn't a fun process writing that song for me, because I had to go over things that I really didn't enjoy thinking about or having at the forefront of my head. And after that song came out, there was obviously a lot of conversation around it. And I was asked if I'd do a radio documentary for the BBC on suicide with myself, someone who had survived, thank God, a suicide attempt, and a psychotherapist, which I did. And there was a huge response to it, which was really bittersweet, because the only reason that there was such a response to it was because so many people were affected by the issues that we covered in that documentary. And shortly after that, I was asked if I'd be up for taking the radio documentary to screen, but it being a broad take and look at male suicide, which male suicide, for anyone who doesn't know, is the biggest killer of men under the age of 45. So I said yes, and we began filming the documentary. I think it was in 2000 and I want to say the end of 2013. I think we started filming the documentary. And halfway through filming, I was called into the BBC, and they asked, well, basically what they said was, even though it was meant to be a broad take on male suicides and not a specific look into and as to why my dad might have taken his own life, that was a narrative that made sense. It was my story. So I had to have a think about whether or not I wanted to go forward with that, because that wasn't how it was sold to me in the beginning. And for me to do that, I was going to have to show myself as being incredibly vulnerable. Yeah. And that wasn't a way I saw myself often. So I was nervous. And
I mean, because this wasn't really widely talked about at the time at all.
It wasn't spoken about at all, to be honest with you. It wasn't something I'd spoken about. Yeah. Not even with my nan. Not since the day that she walked into my room and said, "Stephen, your dad's dead, he's hung himself." Had we had another conversation about it. I decided to do it because I realised that if I can't show people at my most vulnerable, then I'm not being real. People talk about being real and have this idea of what that is, and there's a lot of bravado that comes with it, or a lot of perceived bravado that comes with a lot of the genre that I'm associated with, rap music. There's a lot of bravado and machoism that comes with just being a man, which is part of the problem. And I realised that, and I just thought, you know what, if this is what it takes to really open up the conversation, if it takes me putting my neck on the line, then is what it is, I'll do it. And, I was a crying mess throughout that documentary. And I was nervous because, I was like, is this going to change everyone's opinion of me? Are they going to look at me as weak for showing a vulnerable side to myself?
And sorry to interrupt, were there people around you who were saying, look, this isn't a good idea, from the label or some of the people who were...
No, I didn't really. At that time, I was, I had a lot going on in my personal life, and I wasn't really discussing much with many people. Right. And then with this, the filming of this documentary going on, I was going through a lot that I wasn't being very vocal about. But the documentary come out, and everything that I'd worried about disappeared in that hour. I've never actually watched the documentary. I've never watched it. I think if I have kids, I will, but I don't really feel the need to put myself through that. But it was, and again, the response was phenomenal. But what that's enabled me to go on and do, to become patron of anti-male suicide charity Calm, the work I've been able to do with them, the work that I've then, by way of working with that charity, been able to do with the Royals through Heads Together, which brought 11 mental health and anti-suicide charities all under one umbrella, to walk into schools with Prince William. I was just in a tracksuit, don't worry, I kept it right, really. To go to Buckingham Palace, it was funny, I was there, it was actually when I met Adwa, him with Adwa Bar, the model. we've been able to do some great work together with, she has a charity called Girls Talk, which is incredible. But we first met at a Palace, and we both kind of saw each other and what each other were wearing. I had a pair of Vans on, and she had a pair of Reebok Classics. And we were like, we've underdressed, didn't we? And when we were in the Palace, Prince Harry pulled us both aside, and he went, listen, if my grandmother saw what either of you were wearing, she would have a fucking heart attack. But that was the reason that we were there, because we can engage audiences that would turn off otherwise.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, as you said, this has become a crisis, male suicide. Do you think, how much do you think it's because we're becoming more aware of this, or are there particular is there a particular environment or factors which is making things worse right now?
I think this is so multifaceted. No one person's story is the same. I think the common factor between people who take their own lives is the inability to tolerate how they feel at that moment. And that's what separates someone who will take their own life from someone who won't. I think from the male aspect of it, I don't think we've really caught up with where the world is at. I think there was a time when the whole stiff British upper lip, you know, during war, post-war, was probably necessary, and we had to stick our chests out, you know, puff our chests out and get on with things. I think what we're seeing is probably, you know, the remnants of that, because that's been passed down.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's a generational thing. I don't think there's sadly any overnight fix for this. I think, you know, we need to move on as a society, and that's going to take generations.
I mean, you talk a lot about this, and in particular, you talk quite a lot to companies and in kind of corporate environments. A lot of people here work in the advertising or design industries, which are, you know, very pressurized businesses, and there's a lot of focus on whether you succeed or fail, and very long hours and so on. I mean, how good do you think the world of work is in helping people through these things? What do we need to really do better?
This is an interesting one, because I think a lot of, you know, we spoke about partnering with brands and working with corporations, and it's great to get in front of these people and have these conversations, but I think a lot of companies want to be seen to be saying the right things. How many of them are actually actioning anything by way of, you know, implementing support for the people that need it beyond that? I don't know, but I mean, it all starts with awareness, right? Before understanding comes awareness, and there is a heightened awareness, and people are becoming more aware of what a crisis this is. And what corporations and companies have to be aware of is that by creating an unsafe environment where people feel like being present and being noticed means they're working hard. Like, that's not the best way to get the best output out of someone, and there's enough studies to show that. But if that's the environment you're creating, where people don't, one, feel safe to talk about anything that they may be struggling with, be it mental, physical, anything, you know, then people are going to internalize things. If you don't create an environment where, you know, people don't feel like they have to work a ridiculous amount of hours beyond what they would otherwise, you know. We've got an attitude towards work in England where it's like, how do you work hard? You finish work and then you work some more. Not the best way to get the best output out of someone. Yeah. We need to create environments where people know they're not going to be punished, where if you have a problem with your mental health, it's not a case of confessing or admitting because it's not a crime. You know, you have to know there's no punishment that's going to come with that. Otherwise, if you're creating environments where none of those things are okay, and people are worked to the bone every day because that's the only way they see they can progress, then you're actually creating an environment where you are going to breed mental health issues. We know what the effects of exposure to chronic stress are, and their heightened anxiety, their worsened depression, their clogged arteries. These are all things that can be caused by exposure to chronic stress, which, you know, can be a result of being overworked, of, you know, not being able to express yourself. Yeah. And to be honest with where you're at and how you feel. So, you know, I think corporations and companies especially have got to take a look at what they might be putting their staff through and how they can better help their staff to, even if it's done purely as a selfish reason to get better output out of the staff that they have, like, surely it would make sense for them to start helping their staff feel better. Yeah, and I guess it's exacerbated by the
presence of these, where we're always on, always available.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you deal with that in your own life and stepping away from the pressure to always be contactable, always to be involved, always to be having a response straight away?
It's taken me a little while, to be honest, because, you know, I love my phone just as much as everyone else hates theirs. It's a very love-hate relationship I have with it. You know, I try not to look at it as soon as I wake up now, which is really important. I've done many of these talks over the last few weeks. A few, thank God, with people much more intelligent than me and much better educated in the sector. And I've learned things from people. You know, that first hour when you wake up, like a lot of people wake up and watch the news. Bad idea. Bad idea. Like that first hour of your morning is really important and can dictate the rest of your day. You know, people, you know, the phrase, got out on the wrong side of bed. It's really easy to put yourself on the wrong side of bed if you wake up and look at your phone and panic due to an email that you probably, having been given an hour to sort of ease into your day, wouldn't have been as panicked and would have been in a better place to cope with it. But all of a sudden you're reactive. Yeah. You know, you switch on the TV and you're made aware of a disaster which you didn't need to see in your waking moments, you know what I mean? And we all want to be informed. We all feel like we have to know everything all the time, but we don't. And it's crazy to think that the world is a safer place than it's ever been, but no one would probably ever say that without knowing that as factual, because we're so much more aware of everything that goes on everywhere. Yeah. I think we need to become our own filters. Everyone's all for putting filters on pictures, but actually we need to filter our usage. And that is something that comes down to us. That's our choices and our decisions. And I guess it comes down to educating children as well and giving them the tools that they need to be well and be mentally well in today's day and age. Yeah.
And you explore a lot of these themes and issues in the writing that you've been doing for Book of Man, which is a fantastic website which I'd urge you all to check out. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you came to be involved and how you use writing to explore these themes?
So it's all a bit mental because for me especially, it's crazy because I left school at 13. I fell out of mainstream education when I was 13. When I was leaving primary school, I'd been to 3 primary schools. But when I was leaving the third of the 3, Tyson, after doing my SATs, I was offered the opportunity to sit the entry exam for St Paul's Academy because I was a really bright kid. I just didn't like going to school. And I said, no, I don't want to go there. And my nan just listened to me for some reason. But didn't let me go to the school I wanted to. I was from Hackney and she sent me to school in Tottenham. I was like, cheers, Nan. Thanks for that. And 13, I fell out of mainstream education, eventually ended up in a pupil referral unit and left school without ever getting a single GCSE. So to have been even asked to write columns for the Book of Man was crazy. And have just been nominated for a PPA award as well, Columnist of the Year, which is, so just, yeah, I'm, you know, I'm really fortunate with my career because I've just stumbled into all these different places where I never thought my work would take me. Like, I started out just battle rapping, you know, just taking the mickey out of someone while making it rhyme to a beat, which is a lot harder than it sounds when I say it like that. Trust me, that was, you know, there's elements of my career which are extremely stressful now, but none are as stressful as that ever was.
So, writer, filmmaker, and still musician. Are there any other fields that you'd love to move into?
Devout roast dinner enthusiast. I love a Sunday roast. If you don't follow I had to separate my 2 Instagram accounts because I couldn't keep posting pictures of roast dinners under green because it was just proper diluting the music. So my second account is @I used to rave, but now I. Should you want to know where you can find the best roast dinners all over the country?
Where's the best roast in London right now then?
My kitchen. Sadly, I can't invite you all.
What's your favourite meat?
I love slow cooking lamb inside.
Okay, all right. Yeah. I didn't think we end up talking about this, but... Hey.
I know, but you know, it's no different to my life. I always end up in weird places.
So what's next for you? Artistically, what have you got going on?
Artistically, so I just finally managed to find out the release dates for the next EP. So music is imminent. There'll be 2 EPs this year, album next year. There's a winter tour, which is yet to be announced, which we'll be announcing really soon, along with the release date of the EP. Lots of music. I took myself, October before last, I stopped filming documentaries. I'd been making films for 4 years. I did 7 in 4 years, and I needed a break. I had to find my feet again, because I've been living in the shoes of other people the whole time I was making those documentaries. So I found my feet, and they took me back to the studio, and that's pretty much where I've been for the last year and a half. And so, as my manager put it, I'm song rich. I've got a lot of music that people have yet to hear, which is different for me. Normally, you know, with the first 2 albums, we'd put out singles, and I was still making the albums, whereas it's quite, I don't know, maybe it's part of the reason that I feel a hell of a lot more relaxed than I used to, is because I'm able to, well, you know, you never know what's going to happen one day to the next, but, you know, I can pretty much see what's coming for the next year and a half by way of music releases anyway, which is quite a nice place to be.
Fantastic. We're going to take this downstairs to the social stage, where there'll be a Q&A with Stephen. So if you have questions for him, please come downstairs and put your questions to him. But for the moment, Professor Green, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. Thank you.